All right, vocab, theorem. In the solve it, you may have noticed a relationship between vertical angles. You can prove that this relationship is always true using deductive reasoning. A theorem is a conjecture or statement that you prove true. Just make sure you get that vocab term theorem defined in your notes. One more time, a theorem is a conjecture or statement that you prove true. The vertical angles theorem, Theorem 2-1. So it states that vertical angles are congruent. In this case, we would define angles 1 and 3. Let me go back. Define angles 1 and 3 as being congruent because they're vertical angles. So vertical, in plain English, we often think of vertical as being up and down. So it might seem really common sense to us that angles 2 and 4 would be called vertical angles because one's up above the other and they're aligned vertically. 1 and 3 are aligned horizontally, but in the geometric sense, they're also considered vertical angles because to define vertical angles, those are angles that are across an intersection from one another. So angles 1 and 3 would be congruent, and 2 and 4. When you're writing a geometric proof, it may help to separate the theorem you want to prove into a hypothesis and conclusion. Another way to write the vertical angles theorem is if two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. And that's going to be really useful to you in the future. The hypothesis becomes the given statement, and the conclusion becomes what you want to prove. Here we can see a proof of Theorem 2-1. We won't spend time going through this one, but it's here to show you a two-column proof using the given information and proving that angles 1 and 3 are congruent. Problem number 1, using the vertical angles theorem. The question is, what is the value of x? Well, here we have two vertical angles, and their measurements are given to us as algebraic expressions, 2x plus 21 and 4x. Since we know that vertical angles are congruent, we can write an equation 2x plus 21 equals 4x. And then we solve it like we would in an Algebra 1 class where we're trying to isolate the variable, in this case x. We have variables on both sides of the equation, and so our first step is to collect them all either on the left or the right. The general rule to do the least amount of work says that we would subtract 2x from both sides of the equation. Our 2x's would cancel, and we're left with 21 equals 2x. And now we divide both sides of the equation by 2 using inverse operations to isolate x, and we find 21 halves to be our value of x. Here's your got it question. What is the value of x in this problem where we have vertical angles, one whose measurement is represented as 3x, and the other whose measurement is represented as 2x plus 40?